So, in section 3A, we are going to start the beginning of something that you are going to have trouble with at first. But you will eventually, if you pay attention, this will be one of the easier parts of mathematics in Math 2. Like when you look at this, you may have no clue as to what you're supposed to be doing, which makes sense to me because you've never seen this kind of stuff before. That's going to be confusing when you look at those kind of problems. But really, what we're doing when we do these problems is we're doing a proof. Proofs are where the solution is already known. You're just going to show me that you know how to get to the answer. There are statements and there are reasons. You're going to be doing something called a two-column proof. And you're going to prove to me that you know how the answer is derived. Basically, if I were to say what kind of math this is, it's 100% something called logic. It's not the kind of math where you have to multiply or do anything else. You have to think your way through some things and demonstrate it by writing down the correct things as we go. So what I decided to do for you is I decided to make 7 steps to how you're going to do the proofs. These 7 steps should get you through everything on worksheet 3A. I've passed out to you worksheet 3A. If you were to flip 3A over, that's 3B. We're not doing 3B today. These notes are only for 3A, which is the front side of this worksheet. We're only doing the 6 problems on the front side of the worksheet. Okay. What we're going to do, step 1, we're going to write the given statement as our first statement. I'll explain to you what that means. The second thing we're going to do, we're going to write given as the first reason. Then we're going to add congruency marks to our drawing when something is proven congruent. Then we're going to prove any other congruent parts, our sides and angles, and if a side or an angle is shared in both triangles, it is congruent to itself by the reflexive property. That's what 3A is all about. It's about this reflexive property. The last statement is what we're trying to prove, and we're going to prove the triangle is congruent using the 5 postulates from 3.2, like side, 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 angle, side, angle, side, angle, 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 side, and HL. Let's go through it. I've chosen number 1. This should look just like what you have on your number 1 worksheet. What we are going to do is, given this information, we're going to prove that triangle DAB is congruent to another triangle. And it's going to be laid out in a 2-column proof. This is a 2-column proof because there's 1 column and another column. So the first thing that we do is we write the given statement as your first statement. What is given to us? Segment AD is congruent to BC and segment AB is congruent to segment CD. That's what's given to us. The first step is we take this information and we write it as our first statement. Guess what they did? They already did that for us for our first statement. They've done number 1 for us. When you get to number 3, you should know what's going to go into that first box because of what's given. Sometimes it will be done for you. Sometimes you're going to have to just copy it word for word and put it in the box like number 3. Hoping that makes sense to you. Okay? So, they've done this. It goes there. But on number 3, they didn't. So what do we do on number 3? I'm jumping to number 3. I actually write angle A is congruent to angle B. I just copy it. Just like that. because that's what my first step says to do. Angle ADC is congruent to angle BDC. That's what step 1 says. Thank you for jumping to number 3 on yours. I like that. Good job. You just take everything that's after the given, and that's your first statement. Word for word, letter for letter, comma for comma, angle symbol for angle symbol, congruent symbol for congruent symbol. Step number 2. We started the proof by writing the given statement as our first statement. We did that. Now, for the first reason, we're going to say the reason we know this is because it is given. Why do I know that AD is congruent to BC and AB is congruent to CD? Because it is given. That's what you wrote down for your second step. Which means if I jump now to number 3, I bet you know what the reason is that we know angle A is congruent to angle B and angle ADC is congruent to angle BDC. What's the reason? You actually write that out. That's it. Those are your first 2 steps. We should always know what our first 2 steps are because it's how we start off the proof. Every proof will start off this way on these worksheets. Okay? That's steps 1 and 2. Step 3. Add congruent marks to your drawing when something is proven congruent. So this is what we're going to do. I'm going to, that should say 2. I'll fix that. I have now started with this information. AD is congruent to BC. I'll go to my picture and I see here's AD. And here's is congruent to BC. So I'm going to add a congruency mark for AD is congruent to BC. Because it was proven, because it was given. That is the same as that. Add the marks. This is step 3. What else is congruent? It says AB is congruent to CD. But they're not necessarily congruent to each other, so I'm going to use the double. Because AB is different than AD, I think. I'm not sure. It's congruent to CD. Because it was given to us, I know that this is the statement. I know that that information I have to add to my drawing. Every single one of these, you're going to add that information to the picture. There is something that is shared in this triangle and in this triangle. We talked about that in section 2. What is the same in both triangles is this side, and it has letters. It's BD. Segment BD is congruent to segment BD. It is the same in both triangles. Number 5 says this. If a side or an angle is shared in both triangles, it is congruent to itself. How come? Because of the reflexive property. And if we're going to get fancy, it's of congruence. This is congruent to itself. What's my reason? The reflexive property, I'm going to abbreviate, of congruence. When something is shared, when something is the same thing as itself, we're going to put reflexive. And I need to fix this. This is a 2. Did I just prove that BD is the same as BD? Then guess what? I can go over here and I can add a triple is the same as the other triple. We're almost done. We have proven this. We've taken the given statement. We know it's given. We've said that BD is the same as BD. It's the reflexive property. And now I can prove that triangle DAB, 1, 2, and then it goes, I guess, 3. DAB, 1, 2. What triangle are we trying to prove it? We went from the 1 to the 2, so I need to go from the 1 to the 2. The order matters. What letters go here? What other triangle are we proving it congruent to? BCD. This needs to be triangle BCD. Macy? No, it cannot. Because we started with D, then we went to A. We went across the single one mark single. Then we went to the B, which was the double. I have to go from a single to a double. I have to go from a single to a double. Otherwise, it wouldn't be corresponding matching parts. It has to be BCD. And I know that this triangle is the same as that triangle because of a postulate you learned in the previous section. Look at your picture now. What 3 letters are we going to use for our reason? See, if you know what it is, the 3 letters are, say them out loud. Oh, good. Perfect. That's your proof. A proof is where you come up with statements and you give reasons why you know things. You knew this because it was given. You knew that this is the same as itself because it's reflexive property of congruence. And then you know the 2 triangles are the same by the side postulate. That's a proof. That's how simple it is. It may seem confusing to you. Let's try to finish number 3. We know that the given statement is angle A is congruent to angle B. We know that angle ADC is congruent to angle BDC. Let's add that to our picture now. Angle A is congruent to angle B. I'm going to put a single arc is congruent to the single arc. Angle A is congruent to angle B. Single, single. The second thing that was given to me is that angle ADC, side, then the vertex, then the other side, ADC is this little skinny sliver of an angle. I'm going to put a double arc. Is congruent to side, vertex, side. BDC, another double arc. Anytime you prove something in your proof, even if it's given, add the marks to the picture. You might get stuck now. You might say, okay, well, I have an angle. I have an angle. What else can I add to this picture? Something that might be shared in both. Do you know what's shared? Do you see a side that is shared in both triangles? I bet you know what 2 letters they are. CD. Now let's write that as our statement. CD, segment CD, is going to be congruent to segment CD. Some of you may not like this because you say, well, I know CD is the same length as CD. Exactly. But what writing this down does is it allows us to put a congruent mark here, that this is the same in both triangles. Why do we know that something is congruent to itself? We wrote that down for step number 5 in our notes. That's our reason. What is it we are trying to prove? Whatever we're trying to prove is what goes as our last statement. It says triangle ADC is congruent to, and it doesn't it has a blank here. We're going to need to fill that in, and let's see if we can figure this out. A is the arc, then we go to the double arc, then we go through the single ADC. is congruent to, what's the matching parts for the other triangle? Has to be BDC. And I bet you may even know, because we have an angle. Angles can't touch other angles, but we can go angle next to an angle touching a side. What's our reason? Any guesses? AAS is the reason. Very simple. We should probably fill in up here that it's triangle BDC as well when we're doing that problem for number 3. I'm going to do one more with you, and then I'll give you some time to do the work. This will be the end right here. Okay, the whole thing is blank. Do you know what goes for your first statement? You write everything. You may have to write it really small. Angle BDC and angle ADC are right angles. There's one other thing that we need to write. I'm going to squeeze it in here. BC is congruent to AC. You just copy everything after the word given, and we're putting it in as our first statement. It's our beginning information. What's your reason? Every time. Every time? Yes, every time. Let's keep it simple. The next thing that you do after you write that first statement, that first reason, is you start taking what was given to you and you put it in the picture. BDC and ADC are right angles. So BDC is a right angle, and ADC is a right angle. Those are both right angles. I added to my picture. The other thing that's given to me is that BC is congruent to AC. So I'm going to put a single and a single. Now, I don't know what else is here, but is there anything else that I know is congruent to itself in these two triangles? Something that might be the same as itself. Shared. DC. You could also say CD. Order doesn't matter here. DC is congruent to. You have to make that statement. The reason is reflexive property of congruence. Then you can add that to your picture. What is it we're trying to prove? We're trying to prove that triangle ADC is congruent to another triangle. Triangle A. Then we go to the right angle. Then we go through the 2 side to C. ADC. The letters have to match to triangle what? BDC this time. I'm going to put that up here as well. And if you're looking at what is touching what, I have a side touching a side touching an angle. There is no side-side angle postulate. But there is one that looks like SSA. We just have to have a right angle in it. These ones have right angles. And that is the end of our